The Transition Task Force has been working hard over the past year to listen, pause, and pray in order to discern the direction of our church. We sincerely appreciate the patience and participation of our congregation and council in contributing to the work we've done. In conducting our roundtable discussions, meeting with members, hosting church worship sessions, group surveys, staff surveys, and individual member surveys, we have collected a plethora of data and information. It is through the collection of this data and countless meetings we have created the recommendations we feel express the desires of the congregation and the direction we as a church want to lean into. Today you will hear from a representative of each of the subgroups that worked under the task force. My name is Alicia Schwartz, working with the Mission Vision team. Steve Williamson will be talking on behalf of the self-study team, and Jennifer Hagman will review the work of the staffing team. We will close with a word from Maren Hansch, our Leadership Council facilitator. Let's start today's session learning a few things the Transition Task Force has had learned about the different makes and models of churches in our nation. During our time spent together as a Transition Task Force, we learned a lot from Pastor Paul, who spent over 35 years leading as an intentional interim pastor at churches of all shapes and sizes. One of the most impactful things we heard from Pastor Paul is about different church structures in relation to the size measured by attendance. Patriarchal or matriarchal churches are often rural and small. Typically, newer pastors right out of seminary are placed here. Pastoral churches are run largely by the pastor, and because of this, heavily dependent on the pastor for success. Programmed churches will start to experience leaders by way of the congregation, but still centered around pastors. Leadership is spread around many roles within the congregation. Corporate is last. We will flesh this more later in our discussion, but it's important to note that First Lutheran's attendance in the last 2 years has averaged 290 in 2018 and 315 in year 2019. We have historically been functioning as a pastoral church for many years, which has presented some of the challenges we've faced within our recent history. It is our hope to begin building a foundation to match a corporate church format. Don't let this word scare you away. I think you'll find a lot of us already relate to the functionality of a corporate-sized church and structure within. We'll dive a little bit into the Mission and Vision team report. The Mission and Vision team was tasked to understand and define who we are as a congregation, listen for what the future holds for First Lutheran, and discern the goals needed to get us there. Through the coordination of a congregational survey and meetings with our members, we have brought back our mission statement, crafted a vision statement, and provided strategic goals to move us into the next phase of rebuilding our church. One of the key components in creating these goals was conducting a congregational survey, which was held in March of 2020. The purpose of this survey was to assess the needs and goals of the congregation in order to provide direction for future programming, staffing decisions, and overall directions for First Lutheran. The result of this survey will be released to the congregation in our weekly e-devotion if you're interested in seeing the entire survey results. I'll highlight a few key points today. Thank you again to all who participated. We had a great balance of participants based on age, church, service, attendance, and length of membership at FLC. Our survey was broken into 4 sections. It was from this that we were able to identify 5 areas of focus: adult ministry, youth and children ministry, discipleship, worship, and operations. In 2 sections, we asked members to rate each question with 2 answers to indicate how important each area was to their faith journey and First Lutheran experience, and secondly, to measure how well First Lutheran is doing in each area. The following key points were drawn in conclusion of this summary. We measured how we were doing in areas that include music, worship, and hospitality. Participants rated these areas as highly important to the church experience and currently meeting their expectations. This implies that these categories, while working well, should remain a priority. Areas that proved to need attention, rated most important but not meeting expectation, are in the realm of education. Children and youth family education is an important part of the family's faith experience, both teaching our children but keeping them engaged through youth and adult stages. Adults are also feeling failed in terms of opportunities of fellowship and education. Based on the survey results and the work done by the Mission Vision team, it is our recommendation to focus the next 18 or 2 years on 2 core goals to get our church in alignment and set up for success. Number 1 is staffing our church as recommended by the Transition Task Force staffing team. Number 2 is to work with a director of ministry to build and recruit ministry and resource teams as recommended by the staffing team. It is these teams who will be commissioned to lead in the core functions of our church. Once this foundation is laid, it is then that we will call and be prepared to welcome a new pastor. And now we'll hear from Steve.
Hello, I'm Steve Williamson. I'm the representative from the self-study team of the Transition Task Force. Our job was to really look at who we are as a church and then use that to direct us as to where we want to go as we move forward. So who are we? First Lutheran has been a church for 75 years. This was actually celebrated in March of 2020. Unfortunate timing. We have been an ELCA-affiliated church since 1998. And as of 2019 data, we had just under 1,500 baptized members. Now, we are also a church in transition. Now, why are we in transition and what is transition? Well, transition is simply just a change. The obvious reasons as to why we're in transition. We lost 2 pastors within a 3-month span. And along with this, over the last several years, we've had multiple rounds of turnover with our staff, where we've nearly lost every staff member that we've had. Only 2 staff members still remain the same since 2009, that being Shelley and Jack, our custodian. I want to give a special shout out to Shelley. She's been fantastic throughout all of this. We couldn't have done pretty much anything without her. We also have a need for organizational structure to allow the church to continue to move forward. And then based on our size, as Alicia had talked about, we need to move towards this corporate format. Again, currently we're operating more at a pastoral level. This has caused some burnout of both our staff as well as our pastors. And allowing a new organizational structure will hopefully allow us to move into this future role as a structural, corporate-sized structure of our church. Now, whenever people talk about a transition and a change, they think, well, things must be going very poorly. But that's actually quite the contrary. It's not all bad. We have a lot of things going for us, which we should be very thankful and happy about. Our existing staff is priceless. We do have a beautiful building and property that's just maintained very well. We have excellent music. We have many service-based activities. We have great outreach opportunities. Our volunteers are tremendous, and we could not do what we do without our volunteers. And we have a very highly rated childcare associated with First Lutheran Church. Now, one of the other things that the self-study team was tasked to look at was the actual building and the grounds and how we're utilizing our space. Again, as I mentioned, this is a beautiful building and it's very well maintained. However, we are already outgrowing our space. And in particular, our youth programs seem to kind of overwhelm our space that we have at the time. If you come on a Wednesday evening, you'll actually see confirmation students, our Sunday school type students, as well as our music groups trying to practice in any space they can find. And oftentimes you'll find them in the office, sitting on the tops of desks, even in the copy room, utilizing any space that they can find to try to do their practice as well as perform their education. Plus, our youth group does not have a dedicated space that they can really make their own, which I feel is actually very important as the youth transition from their confirmation days into their adult faith-based learning. Again, as I mentioned, the music groups lack really appropriate and functional space, especially when the church is crowded on those Wednesday evenings. We also lack a true fellowship space. We do have the space behind the sanctuary, but this does become a logistical problem when we're attempting some social events such as funerals, weddings. It really does not allow adequate space to be able to function, as well as with the kitchen set up how it is right now for weekdays. So speaking of weekdays, one of the challenges that can come up is we do share the classroom space on the south side of church with the childcare in 4K. Now this is state-run and state-mandated in terms of what we can and cannot do with this space, especially Monday through Friday during business hours. The space is actually security locked, as it is a state mandate for safety for the children in the childcare. So this does allow limited space and access to this area, except for those who are supposed to be there. So again, Monday through Friday, our ability to utilize that space really is kind of shut down, and we are able to use that space on off hours. Now we do have some financial roadblocks ahead for our challenges that come up with our space. Our Blueprints to the Church program was created to help to decrease our borrowing, to pay down our mortgage, to allow us to borrow further and allow for a phased continued building of our church. Now, unfortunately, with where our finances are at right now, this just can't be a priority for us currently, but hopefully we look at this as a possibility down the road. This does cost a lot of money. So as Alicia mentioned, our goal is to become a more corporate-sized church. And again, as she stated, the corporate title hopefully should not scare people. We're not looking to run a Fortune 500 company at First Lutheran Church. This is simply just a title on how the church is structured. The pastor becomes more of a symbol of unity and stability within the church, and really the church is more run by its staff members as well as the volunteers and the congregation itself. So with a church that is that size, an organizational structure is really essential to provide the support towards the mission of the church as we move into the future. This emphasizes leadership in all areas of the church. It promotes cooperation and unity for all teams within First Lutheran rather than the silos which we have been currently working with. It encourages a streamlined process and communication so each team is able to organize their actions through streamlined processes. It creates a culture of accountability. Each team has to answer to one another, and they're all part of one group, and it's all about working towards the mission of the church. It also provides better access to resources for those who want to be active and those who need the resources by providing a point of contact and directing them in terms of which place they need to go for the care that they need. It also allows for connectivity, and what's extremely important about this, and everybody stated this in their surveys, is that we want First Lutheran to grow, and this hopefully allows us to do that. So this is our organizational structure. The first two things you'll see, and the first right in the middle is extremely important, and that's the cross. So one thing that is very vital to this is that we understand that Christ is the center of all of our working, and Christ is the center of our organizational structure as well. Now, surrounding this cross is what we call our community fellowship circle. If you look closely at this circle, it's actually a dotted or a dashed line. It is not complete, and it is not solid. What this is meant to represent is that our circle is open, and it's open to all children of God. We accept anyone, and we encourage anyone to find their way towards Christ and find their way towards First Lutheran. Inside this circle is our congregation. This is First Lutheran Church of New Richmond, Wisconsin, ELCA. These 4 circles represent what we term as our ministry commission. So each of these 4 circles represents a ministry team: congregational care, discipleship, spiritual growth, and worship. These are all important aspects that we wish to grow and continue to develop as we move our church into the future. You'll see in the middle that they are all connected, meaning that each group shares a common purpose, shares a common goal, and that there's cooperation between all 4 of these teams. You'll see as we break out at the end of my presentation that each of these teams also has different action teams, some of them that are current and some that we hope to develop in the future as well. Now, these 4 concentric circles represent sort of our administration, and this is what we call our resource teams, and our resource commission is what each of these 4 teams makes up. Now, all of these resources are there to provide those resources towards our ministry goals and our ministry commission. It identifies a shared role with all of these and shared resources with everything. In the middle is our leadership council, stating that they are a core part of our church and our growth, and they will continue to do so. We did change the title of this. It used to be the Church Council, and we want to gear it more towards leadership as we move into the future. So that's why it's termed the Leadership Council at this time. Now, something unique to First Lutheran, as many other churches do not have this, is a child care. So the child care board is part of the structure of the church, but we kept it as somewhat separate, although it is part of our discipleship and spiritual growth as we hope to affect those young minds and give them some theological knowledge and continue to bring them towards Christ. There are also a very significant financial aspect towards the workings and financial stewardship of First Lutheran Church. Now, I'm not going to go into full detail on these breakout diagrams, but these kind of explain what each of these mission teams and resource teams are all about and shows where the action teams are, and the italicized font in each of these circles represents teams that we hope to create into the future as we continue to build. So our congregational care team is all about providing care, services, and fellowship opportunities to the congregation. Our discipleship team is all about providing outreach and ministry opportunities. Our worship team is providing welcoming, Christ-centered worship experiences and hospitality. Our spiritual growth is nurturing faith formation and development for Christians of all ages. And our resource teams, our property resources oversee the maintenance, development, and utilization of the church property. Our human resources provide for the management of all staff and whatever volunteer resources of First Lutheran Church. Our financial resource and First Lutheran Church Trust lead the financial development and management and investments of First Lutheran Church. And our communication and technology resources provide ministry to the community through innovative technology solutions. So all of these are all about how we hope to grow, gives us a much better organizational structure, and hopefully leads us into the future as we continue to grow as First Lutheran Church. Now I'll turn it over to Jennifer to talk about our staffing needs.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Hagman, and I'm representing the staffing team to give you some highlights on our work that we had done. One thing we had done is we did send out surveys to the current staff, our childcare staff. We sent out surveys to former staff out to 2 years, and then also our office volunteers. We did receive 31 of these surveys back, which was 65% of those sent out. And 13 questions were on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, and they had options for comments on all of the questions. We did also have 8 additional questions that were commented only, and then 21 questions total. The second thing we did is we did visit with 4 other churches on their current structure to get their feedback on things that are working well for them. And then the last thing we did was we did conduct all individual interviews with the current employees. We talked to Shelley in the office and ministries. We talked to Nikki and Anna in childcare, Jack in maintenance, Chris in housekeeping, Hope with the children's ministry, and Jess the bookkeeper. Now I'll review for you some of the highest scored questions and some of the lowest scored areas and what we're looking to do to make some of those adjustments. So some of the highest scored areas had to do with the physical environment, the working with others, and then having a great environment to work in. So what some of the observations were is that childcare feedback was extremely positive. Nikki and Anna are doing a wonderful job with the childcare that's part of First Lutheran Church. In general, the other comment was people really enjoy coming to work and volunteer at First Lutheran Church. It's a very clean and friendly environment. And lastly, the respondents enjoy really working in a faith environment and supporting the mission and vision of First Lutheran Church. Some of the lowest scored areas and areas of improvement include our current staff structure, our total compensation package, and then staff success in producing God's work at First Lutheran Church. Some of the comments here about being understaffed definitely praised our current volunteers in Shelley, but do know that we do have some improvements to make. Providing an organizational chart with clear understanding of roles and responsibilities. Childcare did comment that they would like more faith training and interaction with pastors and the ministry teams. Ensure all employees have job descriptions. Review our staff compensation to stay competitive with other employers in our area. And then lastly, there was a strong request to have a business director and administration director so that these duties don't fall into our pastoral duties. Through this research and staffing surveys and interviews, the staffing team is making the following recommendations. We would recommend hiring a director of business and administration and would be responsible for those newly created resource teams that Steve just talked about. We would have a director of ministry that would be responsible for those newly created ministry teams and really developing those teams with their groups of volunteers. And then lastly, hiring a director of children, youth, and family to definitely grow our youth and family opportunities for education that Alicia had talked about. This is a little small for you to see, so I'm going to break it up into two sections, but this is an organizational chart that we are proposing to council, and you'll see the different color coding go along with the color coding that Steve had talked about in our leadership with the cross behind it. So you'll see that on the left side is the ministry, and on the right side is the business side of the church. So going into the ministry, this would be where the senior pastor or pastors would fall, and then the director of ministry and the director of children, youth, and family would fall on this side of the church as well. On the right side would be the business side of the church. So this would be the director of business and administration, along with the property, human resources, and those other resource commissions that Steve had talked about earlier. We did color code this again to match nicely into that cross diagram so you can easily see the connection on how everything is tied together. This organizational chart is really for the future. The staffing team is recommending these three positions in no particular order to best position First Lutheran Church for continued growth. The next section we're going to move into is we're going to have some closing words from Maren with our facilitator of our Leadership Council.
Hello, fellow members of First Lutheran Church. For those of you I don't know, my name is Maren Hanch, and I am the lead facilitator of your church council. Your church council is grateful for the work of those who gave their time and gifts as members of the Transition Task Force. I would encourage you to reach out to them and extend your gratitude. I would also like to let you know that while we haven't been worshiping in person and able to see each other, your church council has been hard at work. We have had monthly virtual meetings, just as we have corresponded via phone or email in between our meetings. We have tried to keep you updated regarding the status of First Lutheran via emails and letters we have mailed to your home. Please feel free to reach out to Shelley in the church office if you aren't seeing these emails or have questions and would like to speak with a council member. In addition, if you would like council meeting minutes emailed or mailed to you, please reach out. If at any time you have questions or comments you would like our council members to address, please let us know. The leadership directory listing our contact information has been included in many of the Wednesday electronic devotions. As was mentioned in our most recent mailing to all of you, your church council has determined that it is not yet time to begin any in-person worship, including parking lot formats. Please know this decision came after a great amount of thought and discussion. We have been and will continue to discuss alternative worship opportunities at every monthly council meeting. While we understand that this news is not the news that some in our congregation want to hear right now, we are firm in our decision to lead our church in a healthy reopening when it won't create potential health problems for our members. Now, we need to determine where we as a congregation go as a result of the Transition Task Force final report that was accepted at our July 28th council meeting. You might wonder, what does it mean that the council accepted the report? Well, it means your church council has taken ownership of the report and will now begin to work directly with the recommendations, determining which ones to address first. I thought it was very interesting when during our discussion at our July council meeting, one of our council members asked, so is this a renaissance or is this just cosmetic? We all agreed we wanted our movement forward to be a renaissance or a rebirth of our congregation. Your current council is not interested in a remodel of past leadership designs. We look forward to putting the past behind us and moving this congregation forward. Unfortunately, due to our current public health crisis, this movement forward isn't going as quickly as we'd like. We are, however, very hopeful and confident that with prayer and faith, we'll get there. So, while we'd like to act now on all the recommendations the task force has made, because of our current public health crisis or the coronavirus we are in and our desire to be mindful of our financial resources, we will need to take baby steps. Regarding our finances, as we noted in the eDevo on August 5th and also on August 12th, so far we are keeping up with all of our financial obligations, including salaries, mortgages, utilities, and our 10% benevolence commitment. The first decision we have made as a result of the Transition Task Force report involves embracing the recommended organization structure as a priority. The main part of this organizational structure change is to ensure we establish ministry and resource teams. Each council member has been assigned to be a liaison to a ministry or a resource team. If you have specific interest in one of the teams, please let us know. Our hope is that we could build the teams in September, train in October, and commission for these teams in November. Having strong, well-functioning teams that work together and not in silos or separately will allow us to develop a strong base structure. In addition to building the teams, we will be reaching out to all congregation members, asking for nominations for a call committee in order to begin our search for a pastor for First Lutheran Church. We hope to have the nomination form for those interested in being a member of the call committee available beginning or mid-September. We'll let you know when this is available, and we will provide the form to anyone who requests one. And again, most of our correspondence comes through our electronic devotions that comes out on every Wednesday. So if you aren't receiving those via email, please reach out to the church office and we'll make sure and get those communications to you. While the transition task force gave recommendations to address the three primary staffing positions sooner rather than later, the availability of financial resources is critical to those staffing additions. The three positions, besides a full-time pastor, that were recommended are, first, the Director of Business Operations, which is a full-time position, and that would be a new position. The Director of Children, Youth, and Family Ministries, which is also a full-time position, part of which would fill the gap with Dan Shimmon's departure. And the final position would be an updated Director of Ministry position that would include responsibility for the newly created ministry teams. Currently, Shelley McNitt fills this position. At this time, with the unknowns around when we can meet in person again and not knowing our financial outlook in the weeks to come, we are holding on adding any positions. The mission finance team members have reported to Council that while there are dollars budgeted for the remainder of 2020 for new positions, they are expressing caution in budgeting for these positions longer term. There will need to be a significant commitment as a congregation to increase giving to sustain these positions and not fall short. So to clarify, with our current situation of not knowing when we can gather in person and reopen our church doors, along with what our future giving might look like, we are acting slowly and taking these items for the addition of positions into consideration prior to posting and attempting to fill positions. Currently, the only paid staff we have at First Lutheran are Pastor Paul, Shelley McNitt, Jack Terhar, our bookkeeper Jess Stoltzis, Hope Nadu, and Debbie Weber. Debbie is our office substitute covering for Shelley when she takes vacation. In the future, once positions are filled, your church council looks forward to renaming our church council to Leadership Council and moving away from the management of day-to-day church activities. The name change emphasizes that the council is a leadership group that serves to provide guidance. You may note with the 2020 council, we are no longer using the terms or the titles president and vice president. Instead, we are using lead facilitator and vice facilitator. Facilitation is a term that is used to help people navigate and make things easier for others. Facilitators really serve as guides. So to close, I'd like to continue to ask you to hold all of our members, our current staff, and the future of First Lutheran Church in your prayers. There's much work to do, and we look forward to partnering with you to accomplish this work. And again, if at any time you have questions or concerns for a council member, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.